Good morning, everyone. It is Thursday, November 17th, 9 o'clock in the morning, United States, West Coast time. Welcome to other folks around the world. This is the weekly cluster API provider Azure office hours. We abide by the CNCF code of conduct, so please be kind to one another. Raise hand if you want to speak. At the beginning, we welcome new folks. If you are new or want to introduce yourself for any reason whatsoever, I'll pause here for a few seconds. And if you raise your hand, I'll call on you. If not, thank you for the excuse to take a sip from my coffee. That was nice. David Tessar.
Yes, I'm just letting folks know I'm the new PM here, here to help with Cap Z. So, hello.
Welcome, David. Am I unmuted now? I've shared the agenda doc. Make that one more bigger, I think. Looks like we have a fairly light agenda, so maybe this will be a quick meeting, or maybe we'll have lots of lively discussion. We'll see. All right, so the first thing we want to do here is milestone review, which is interesting because we are at the beginning of a new milestone. So we can actually, if folks are okay, do some quick housekeeping. So we've already got, someone has been doing some good triage here. So that's great. We've got 3 closed issues. Looks like all these are PRs for the 1.7 milestone. So a little bit of history. We released 1.6. I can't remember when, Monday, Tuesday. It was definitely not Friday. Early this week, which followed along from the final patch release for 1.4. So if you're a 1.4 user and want to stay on that for a little while longer, please pick up that. That'll be your last patch release for 1.4 and also a patch release for 1.5. So now we're at the beginning of the 1.7 development cycle. I put a due date here of December 6th. So by convention, we're doing this sort of the first, is that a Tuesday? I can't remember what day of the week it is, but it's toward the beginning of the month is our target for these monthly releases, these monthly minor releases. So maybe it might be worth going through, I'm going to go through the commit history real quick and just see if there's anything that we forgot to tag in the 1.7 milestone that's already landed. So let's see. I'm confident that this all happened. This all landed in 1.6.0. Great. So these are all, did we get this? These are all after the 1.6 release. So let's go ahead and, sorry, I clicked on the wrong one. Let's see. I don't know if this is super critical to add to a milestone. That was actually included in 1.6. Okay, that made it into 1.6. I think we're good actually. 1.7. 1.7. All right, great. So that's great. So let's look at the PR queue now and see what we expect will land in 1.7. That's not tagged with a milestone. I think we'll use this as a guinea pig. I think you see the milestone in that view. All right, great. So I'm not sure if John is here, but I am going to advocate that this will definitely make it in 1.7. So I'm going to tag that. Okay, so Francesco, if you're here and if you're fixing this, thank you so much. Followed a little bit of this on Slack. Let's definitely get this into the 1.7 milestone, and then we will cherry pick this back to 1.6 and 1.5 as well. But let's prioritize getting that in the next month. So this is a cherry pick. We can skip over that. I saw Ashtosh here. This certainly seems like something that we want to land in the next month. Do you agree, Ashtosh?
Yes, we could possibly cherry pick also. It's just a minor fix.
Cool. Then I will go ahead and label that as a fix. This is an easier way to do that. Bug. Here we go.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I'll go ahead and does anyone know? I've noticed that when I do this after a PR merges, it only takes the first one. Is this going to be true if I do this sort of proactively as well? Do I need to do 2 comments? I'm going to do 2 comments just to make sure that it works. But
I think, can you say cherry pick release?
oh, I see. Okay, that would be great.
I think that's, I'm not sure. I can look into that.
Okay, cool. Thank you, Ashtosh. Here's another one for you. This is a bigger chunk of work, but since we're at the beginning of the dev cycle, is it fair to aspire to release this with 1.7 or to land this proposal with 1.7? I mean, this is just a proposal, right?
Yeah, at least the proposal should land. That's what I'm
Great.
feeling. Just we need like a couple of reviews from folks, and we'll see how it goes.
Okay, great. Okay, I think Matt, I heard your voice. This should be. Oh, it's already been tagged.
I just
Great.
in time added it. Yeah.
Oh, you tricky guy. Okay. This I feel will also land. Does that sound fair? Will we be backporting?
so.
We don't backport these types of changes, right?
We could. It's not really a bug fix. Well, I mean, the only problem with not backporting it is if at some point this code is exhausted and then what would be the problem? I don't know.
Well, the problem I could see is that you'd be stuck on not being able to backport new Kubernetes versions. Is that part of the policy? Do we not backport?
Well, we're
new
going to
version?
continue to publish 1804 until it's officially out of support, and then 2004, and so that'll be the default. So I don't think it would actually cause a problem not to backport it, but we might as well.
Yeah, I mean, this is a reference image just largely. Does anybody else want to weigh in on this? This seems like a CI thing that we would potentially get ourselves into trouble if we didn't backport it, as Matt mentions. Go ahead, Mike.
Depends on how far back, but I think we should definitely backport to at least 124. I don't think we need to go back as far as 123 because that, but I think 124 and 125 should at least support it.
Well, the way I read this is that all new Kubernetes versions after this work lands will be tested with 2204. So I think 123 is still in support. So there's likely to be another patch version of 23. So when we pick that up, our CI plumbing will validate it with 2204 as the backing OS image.
Okay.
Does that sound right, Matt?
Oh, so you're referring to like backing patch to already released 123 versions, already released 124 versions, and so on.
How,
Just basically
Matt, do you want to give it a shot? It's kind of hard
Just
to
basically
describe.
new patches. It's difficult code to talk about because it's trying to describe something that just happened in the real world for purely practical reasons, which is we started publishing Ubuntu 2204 images last month, as well as 1804 and 2004. And then this code says, hey, let's start using 2204 as the default as soon as they're available as reference images. So essentially October patches and going forward, will prefer 2204 if you're using the get default code path, if you're not specifying what you want as an image.
And that last part is important. That speaks to the practical outcome of this is that that's how our CI tooling behaves. So this is really going to affect our CI tooling.
Yeah, I don't think we have to go back down. I think I'm moving forward basis for all new releases is appropriate.
Okay, Matt, looks like that worked. I mean, this message suggests 2 branches, so I'm gonna do that for now. Thanks for the pro
Cool.
tip. Okay, cool. So it's not showing the milestone here, which is a bummer. Because I don't know which ones I need to click on, but maybe we'll time box this to 3 more minutes. I'm looking at the clock. Okay, Nawaz, if you're here, this seems like something that we can anticipate
Uh-huh.
for 1.7.
Yeah, it's a pretty small fix.
Okay, cool. Yeah, because it involves markdown, I would say the sooner we can get this in, the better for cherry picks of other things. We're not likely to cherry pick a markdown into an old branch, but it would make it easier for that process. Okay. Is Michael on the call? Let's go ahead and, because we're at the beginning of a release cycle, and I will. Hi, it's cold in the basement. One more minute and then my time box is up and then we'll get to agenda items. And normally this is a little more boring, but we're at the beginning of a release cycle, so it's worth doing this. Okay. This I know is actively being worked on, so I am going to tag this. This seems like a good change. Severio, you're here. Thank you very much for working on this.
You're welcome. I'll need like some help figuring out how to sanitize the existing calls to the bugged function. So I understand that some part of the code will panic now because they don't expect a nil. I'm learning Golang while writing this project, so I would appreciate if I'll ask for help on Slack if someone could show me like the change that are needed to finish that, and then I'll do like all the rest of the work and the testing. But I need some help figuring out how to do properly what is needed and not just doing it in a bad way, right?
That sounds all very humble. Thank you very much. I'm sure you'll
Okay.
have the help you need. We're very appreciative. Okay, so we've got a little bit of work for 1.7. That's good. We've got a populated milestone. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, so it kind of relates to the next conversation, but also to this. With the planner board, I noticed that some of the items you had in there didn't have issues assigned to them. And so one of the ones I picked up about the autoscaler in regards to getting the managed clusters out of experimental point. So I didn't know if you wanted me to create an issue based upon that planner ticket or create a separate issue that was more detailed with it. But I'd like to land that in 1.7 as well.
Yeah, that is a great question. Let's punt on that just for a few minutes when we get to that topic.
Yeah.
But yeah, thanks for bringing that up. We should definitely clarify that. Severio?
There is one more PR that I wanted to ask if we could include in the milestone. I mean, are we finished with the PRs to the milestone, or is
No, great. Go ahead. This is your time.
Okay, so is the 2745 the additional tags? Yeah, it's basically finished. So I just need some more senior person to review it, and this could be merged. It contains 2 commits because one of the commit can be dropped when the other PR I'm working on is merged.
Okay,
So
great.
that's why that's why I didn't squash it, because I wanted to make it easier to revert the change. There is a workaround for that function that is broken. So the function that the converter function that should return null, but it doesn't.
Okay, so this should fall. There's an order of operations here. This should land after the nil.
Well, not necessarily. If you look at the two commits, you'll see that one is the actual change and one is the workaround. So I just need guidance. Do you want to keep this PR with the two singular commits so that you can revert one once the other change lands? Or I should squash this one and merge it only after the other?
Well, by convention, we squash all PRs, but if there are always exceptions. I guess we can, I certainly think that adding this to the milestone is appropriate. So thank you for that call out. Cecile, do you have a comment on this? Go ahead.
Yeah, so Severio, I think for your case here, I think it's great that you separated the two things in two PRs. That gives us more flexibility in the order of merge, since both PRs as is are, good to go. So I would just say whichever one is ready and gets, to review and merge first, let's merge that. And then if the fix merges first, then we can revert the workaround in the future. And if it's the feature first, then we can revert the workaround in this fixed PR as you're doing now. So up to you. I think both work as long as we're like doing the cleanup afterwards to remove the workaround.
Okay, that sounds great. So basically, this one that we are showing now, it seems to me it does not have any one. Assignees would be the people that will merge it, or is the reviewers? I'm confused now. I see reviewers and assignees on the right. I see 4 reviewers and the empty list at assignees.
Yeah, don't worry about that.
Oh, okay.
I'll give you my
So
Jedi,
basically,
my wave. Like that's not,
okay.
that doesn't mean anything.
Okay, so basically this PR is ready. This just needs someone to merge it. The other one, no, I'll work on it next week because it needs to sanitize the functions that we're calling the bucket function, and we can merge that later.
Great. So the only thing it does need is a release note. So we can help you with that offline. Go ahead, Cecile.
Thank you.
Yeah, just I guess general comment and reminder that we need more reviewers. So if you're interested in helping with reviews, please, reach out. If you don't know where to start, reach out, we can help. But yeah, like I think what you're seeing Severio is like you're basically blocked on review, and we're trying to get to most PRs, but we're a very small group of maintainers and we're getting lots of PRs open. So it's hard to get through them all like fast, and the PR queue is pretty big right now. So we're trying to clean up the PR queue so it's easier for reviewers to know what is actually reviewable and what is just stale. But yeah, just I guess general call for help if anyone wants to help with reviews. That's a good one to get started with.
Cool. I'll shout out to Mike. I know he's reviewed some PRs, so that's been awesome. So really appreciate the community leaning in. Okay, that was all really great. So yeah, we've got a UI bug is what we've got here. Oh, that's funny. That's what I wanted to see. All right, we've got 11 items, so we'll populate that out of advance. So did you raise your hand again? Go ahead.
Sorry. Are we closing the 1.6 milestone then?
Oh yeah, thank you. I'm not sure if that was a failure on my part as part of the release process. So let's actually, yeah, we need to move this.
Oh, this is a cherry pick PR, so that's fine.
Oh, is that part of the cherry pick? It gets milestone attribution, or?
I don't think it gets that automatically. I think someone must have added it. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yes, let's close that milestone. So how do I have to go to this view? Close. Good, that always feels great. looks like so next week, maybe we can go through this list in the interest of time and move these into 1.7. But for now, let's continue down the agenda list. Okay, so Severio, looks like you are first up.
Yeah,
did we already
sorry,
talk about this?
Yes, you can skip this. It was exactly what we discussed during the previous discussion.
All right, delightful. The managed Kubernetes might take some time, so maybe let's go to, I'm going to skip over to Ashutosh first. Is that okay with you, Ashutosh?
Yes, but I think we can skip this also, but I'm happy to like talk about that. It's just like the proposal is there and there are a couple of questions. And yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, then let's go through the managed Kubernetes stuff and then we'll go into these flavor update proposals. That sounds interesting. So I think the first thing we can do is look at this. So high level, what we're talking about here is really the graduation of the Azure Managed Cluster, the CAPZ on top of AKS solution from experimental. So Mike, you mentioned that you wanted to pick some work off of this board, and you correctly observed that these are very low fidelity sticky notes in the GitHub interface and not actual issues. So yeah, let's put it to a vote. Do we want to keep, I mean, I suppose let's first talk about, is this board useful? The reason this is useful for someone like myself is to be able to, for example, say this is the most important thing. And so it's number one on the list. It's actually not, I don't think. And so I'm just going to move it down to a random place. So that's really a really powerful, simple gesture that I think will help federate all the work across this so that folks can just pick stuff off the top of the queue. But so I'll just stop and allow folks to raise any concerns about using this project interface as a way to help burn down concrete work items in this graduation process. Go ahead, Mike.
I think the only thing that's kind of missing with it is for those that can have associated tickets, we probably should have associated issues. When there are them, I know in cases of some of these there are not. So the question is do you want, when someone like me picks it up, to hit that automatic create issue, fill in the details if they're not already there, which I think the answer is yes. And then fill in the stuff and then make sure it's there, just because like you said, these are kind of more breadcrumby than actual detailed fleshed out things. But I love the board. I love that we can stack rank them. I think it's really useful.
Yeah, I think if we go through the conversion to issue, we should be able to get all that. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, the other thing I would add about making these issues is that I don't think these as is can be linked to directly. So if these are issues, then we can have a direct link to each one, just so then we can kind of more easily figure out exactly where these ideas came from.
Yep, awesome. I mean, this is really the process of one person in a virtual room with sticky notes putting things onto a wall. It's that first sort of Scrum gesture. Go ahead, Severio.
Yeah, sorry, I'm confused here because I see only the Azure managed cluster. So there is not any Azure managed control plane item. So this graduates independently.
That's such a great question. That speaks to orthogonal work that we're doing to kind of make this easier to understand. So think of Azure Managed Cluster in this case as a metaphor for Azure Managed Control Plane plus Azure Managed Cluster plus Azure Managed Machine Pool. Basically, the entire AKS surface area. We're using Azure Managed Cluster to indicate that.
Okay, I see.
If that's confusing.
No, it's okay. It's just that I think there is a missing item in this list because I don't see. I see that you have the load balancer profile, but I don't see the outbound type. this an alternative to the load balancer profile. So that should be there before you graduate.
Great. I would advocate that.
Is the intention here to map all the AKS features, or I misunderstood the intention?
Really, the intention with this project board is just to make it more concrete what we agree on as a community to be the criteria for graduating CAPC AKS from experimental.
Oh, okay. No, it because it looked like a list of features of the AKS API that you want to support, right? And then I noticed that there is this one that is completely missing, and then I thought maybe I should speak up, but I was confused because it belongs now to Azure Managed Control Plane.
Right. Well, I mean, so it's what I said before. It's just meant to represent what we want to get done before we graduate from experimental. If you notice, it might not have been like expressed clearly, but every single one of these but one is a end-to-end test work stream. So these are all my understanding when I wrote these of like things that we're not currently testing with end-to-end that I advocate we want to test before we would consider graduating from experimental.
Okay. So my comment is out of scope then, because the thing that I am talking about is not even implemented. So forget about it.
Right. So I can click on another link here and invite you and any other folks listening. There is a mention in this proposal doc about how we will handle features. So it's, I'm not a lawyer, but when I play one on TV, it results in not great language all the time. What I'm trying to express here is that what we want to do during this process of graduation is audit the existing code and ensure that the current API, because what we're going to be graduating is the API. We want to ensure that the API as currently situated can be evolved in a non-breaking way to support all the features. We don't actually want to say that every AKS feature must be supported before we graduate from AKS, from experimental. So I would invite folks to go ahead and comment here and make sure this language makes sense, or make sure that you agree with the language, so that when we graduate, we have a sort of consensus understanding of how feature support fits into things. So TLDR, we're not going to implement every AKS feature before we graduate. Go ahead, Cecile.
I think I might know the answer to this, but just in case it's not obvious to others, when I look at this list, what's obvious to me right now is that the board only covers item 6 right now, so it's mostly focused on end-to-end tests. So what about 1 to 5? Like, is that just not done yet? Is it just like we haven't had time to convert those to issues, or is it that there's no work to be done? Like, what's...
Yeah, it hasn't been formed, that hasn't been organized. Some of these actually don't have work streams necessarily, or the work streams are not code. So that it is certainly possible to express in a GitHub issue format, like auditing work or investigation work or validation work or whatever. So I've done a lot of that. John's done some of that. Not all of it has been captured as an issue.
Okay, cool. Just clarifying in case someone is looking at this right now thinking, okay, so that's all we need to do for graduation. There's also other stuff that's not tracked here yet.
Yeah, what might not be clear is that, so this is not code work. 1 is not code work. That's already done. Number 2 is not code work. And I am working on gathering community consensus that we will not do this, but that's not, this will be code work if that consensus doesn't arrive, and it's the opposite. And in fact, we need to do that work. So that would be a whole set of work streams to like basically refactor the API. This is audit work. For the most part, there might be some work streams, like we might decide we want to break the API before in order to fulfill this objective. This is potentially going to result in like sort of child work streams as the result of an audit. So that could be clarified as an issue. This work needs to be classified because a lot of it's already been done. And then this is the large set of unfinished concrete work, which is why when I went to quickly create this board, that was what I was able to sort of scaffold out. Okay, cool. So yes, well, let's convert these to issues. I'm not sure exactly if we would benefit by having like a formal Zoom meeting to do that, or if we could just self-organize on Slack. I would say let's start by self-organizing on Slack, and if folks who are interested in working on this want to just hop into Zoom and do this, or set aside like a regular meeting rotation. I've got a Zoom room. I think other folks have Zoom rooms. Let's do that there, but probably not during this meeting. Cool. Any further questions on this board? All right, great. So the final thing I'll mention on this is, that I have been working in Cluster API to organize a regular sort of formal group that will regularly meet to discuss managed Kubernetes and Cluster API. So this is kind of an invitation to join this discussion and join this group if you want. The purpose of this will be to define managed Kubernetes in Cluster API as a long-term solution toward achieving provider consistency across, we have, as of right now, we have Kappa and KapZ delivering a sort of equivalent managed Kubernetes solution, which is actually recent. Kappa was delivering a slightly different formula for managed Kubernetes, but for practical reasons and in order to, I'm hand waving around a lot of the details, but in order to be compatible with cluster class, the fastest way forward was to adhere to this, the way of having a kind of proxy Azure Managed Cluster CRD resource that doesn't do all the work, and all the interesting stuff is in Azure Managed Control Plane. Sorry, for AWS, it's not going to be Azure, obviously. So AWS and Azure are using a common approach. Oracle is using a different approach. So this working group will be to share war stories from that and to figure out how we can define managed Kubernetes and Cluster API. Obviously, the first step is to figure out if we actually do want to do that. And then to define what that looks like, and then eventually work with the provider ecosystem. So this is going to be a long, 6 months, 18 months, I'm not sure. Work within the provider ecosystem to advocate for a sort of V1 or maybe even a V2 API that defines managed Kubernetes as a first principle from Cluster API, so that the provider implementations eventually are consistent, so that users can do multi-cloud managed Kubernetes much more gracefully than they can now. So please feel free to say hi there, and we'll include you in this group, and you can have your votes counted. Okay, cool. I think that's there's like a lot going on. So the reason for that group is to be able to sort of wrangle the day-to-day updates without having to spend 45 minutes in the CAPI office hours and Kappa and KapZ office hours. Any final questions on that before we get to Ashutosh? You want to literally just skip over this for today?
Yeah, I mean, if anybody have gone through the PR, then I can start discussion. But one important thing that I just want to highlight on this one is the real challenge here is the distribution of keys to the management cluster. And that is one area that I would like to groom, maybe on Slack or somewhere. So TLDR is workload identity needs a public and private key to be present on the control plane nodes so that Kube controller manager is able to sign the tokens. So for Bootstrap cluster, that is a kind cluster. It means you know, for admins, it would be just like, you know, bringing their own keys or just generating it. For Bootstrap cluster, it's easy. But when we actually create a management cluster on Azure, there is like two-step thing. First is like doing a cluster CTL init and doing a cluster CTL move. So we need to really figure out how do we want to distribute the keys. One naive way, you know, that came to my head is like, you know, maybe cluster CTL has some subcommand that could simply do an SCP of the keys. But yeah, that looks little not clean to me.
Cool. This certainly seems like a valid agenda item to discuss in office hours. Does anyone have any thoughts on this? Dane?
So the way we've done this in our clusters today, now granted these aren't AKS clusters, they're just KCP clusters in Azure. We just have a job that runs on the control plane. This is after the, so we're not using it during Bootstrap. So that may change your requirements, but we bootstrap with a service principal initially, and then we also pivot to make the cluster self-managed effectively. So we're pivoting into the workload cluster. After we pivot, then a job runs on the control plane and basically uses the service account signing key that kubeadm generated, and it constructs the JSON documents that need to be published into a blob storage bucket.
Yes, publishing JSON document, it's still like, so my question is, when we create a cluster on Azure infrastructure, and if I want that cluster to become a management cluster, how do we really give them the keys? And these are the keys that actually will be mounted on API server and controller manager containers so that they're able to use it to sign the service account tokens.
So,
and this is a requirement to use workload identity.
So that would be plumbing it the other direction. That's possible, but potentially problematic, because effectively you'd be doing a service account signing key rotation on a live control plane, right?
Yep.
So what we did instead was the other direction. Since kubeadm already creates a service account signing key, using that as the source of truth, and then telling the federation to trust that.
Yeah, it would be really helpful if you can comment on the PR, and then, you know, I can take a look and, you know, update the PRs and try it out. Thank you.
Yeah, and Ashutosh, I know that you have had some conversations with Anish, who is the maintainer for workload. I feel like a conversation between the two of you would be fruitful on this particular question. If you had a chance to talk with Anish about this specific.
Yeah, so Anish's idea was to actually go ahead with a proposal so that we are able to do async conversation, and he'll get back onto this one. So yeah, we'll groom with that. Yeah. So I was like holding up myself because of this uncertainty, but then we thought we'll just raise whatever is in my head, and then we'll dump all the info out there, and then we can groom there. And once it looks good, I'll keep updating the document.
That sounds practical.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Any further questions for Ashutosh on this? Thank you so much for working on this.
Yeah,
not the easiest thing to solve.
Yeah, one more thing that I want to bring into light, sorry if anybody raises hands, about is the multi-tenancy part, because so now the CAPZ part is tied to a service account. That means at one point in time, CAPZ part is able to use one identity, right? And this looks like a little deviation from how Azure Cluster Identity has been working right now, because I could potentially create multiple Azure cluster identity and tie it to a workload cluster, right? And right now, the max that we can do in terms of multi-tenancy here is we could just simply update the client ID of service account, not the service account. We could put an annotation on service account and change the client ID. So it just switches to a different identity. But that is really not a multi-tenancy thing because we are not able to use multiple identities simultaneously with the CAPC pod. So these are like two challenges that I, kind of figured out while I was doing the POC and trying to figure out. So yeah.
Is this a known gap? Again, I would ask, does Anish know about this as a known gap for the workload identity? Do workload identity pods on a common cluster have to share a single service account? That seems to be what you're saying. Or be derived from. Is this just a known gap with workload identity? Do all? Go ahead.
Yeah. So I don't know if there is some better way to do that because I scanned to the document and there was one contributor who pointed me to a link that can possibly help with multi-tenancy. And Anish also said that he'll respond back onto this one. So far, I think, as far as I know, the only way to change identity is to patch your service account. But I don't know how can we possibly have multiple identities tied to the same CAPC pod, and then CAPC pod has the freedom to actually use it for workload cluster 1 and then a different identity for, let's say, workload cluster 2. Right now it is possible because we can say this is the Azure cluster identity that this workload cluster 1 should be, for this workload cluster 1, this is the identity that should be used. Does that make sense?
A little bit. I want to let Dane remark. He's got his hands up.
Yeah.
There may be some gaps in like the helpers and things, but at its core, all that workload identity is doing is federated credentials, right?
Yeah.
So it seems at least theoretically completely possible that you could have multiple app registrations, multiple service principals that have the same federated credential configuration, which would mean that CAPZ could, in theory, utilize the same service account token to log into multiple service principals that have, for the different workload clusters. Now that's highly theoretical though, right? Because that doesn't mean that the webhooks support that use case or the nice helpers. It might mean that you need to write a lot of custom code to log in with each of those and get a bearer token for those workloads.
Yes. Yeah, and also I need to understand more on this federated identity part. So, but from the user experience part, if you look, it's like, okay, I just can't, I'll just have to stick to one particular service account and whatever identity that service account is, federated with. So, but yeah, Dan, it would be very great if you could put your ideas on the document so that, we can groom and navigate further. Thanks a lot.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Yeah. And the third one was related to, again, user experience. That's like, initially it requires a couple of manual steps, but that shouldn't be a challenge. I think we can figure out a way to automate, or there could be some prerequisite steps for the admins, like, setting up the Azure blob storage or any storage where they will put their, OIDC documents. So, but yeah, the top two, multi-tenancy and distribution of the keys, are like the real ones.
This clause, should one of these have a P in them instead of both being AWI?
Oh, I just Can you repeat? Are you asking what is AWI?
Well, it says though AWI has a lot of advantages as compared to AWI. I'm wondering, should this be API?
This would be AD pod identity. Okay,
got it. That's okay.
That's a bug. I'll fix it. Thanks. You just
just
reviewed
add
the
it.
document, Jack.
I'll just add, yeah, I'll add a quick comment.
Yeah, sorry. AD pod identity.
Yeah,
Yeah.
There's already enough acronyms of acronyms here. Cool, thank you so much. And thanks, Dane, for adding your thoughts. Going once, going twice. Okay, 10 minutes is hopefully enough to take up Akinlolu's proposal here. Are you still around?
Yeah.
Cool. I'll click on this first one.
Cool, thank you. So this issue was something that I ran into earlier when I first started learning Cluster API and CAPZ. But the simple explanation here is when you run the cluster CTL generate command for AKS twice, you can apply the generated YAMLs back to back without making changes to every template after the first one. So I noticed there was a PR a while back that added the ability to add a name for the machine pools, which is the root cause of the failures. So I was wondering if it would be a good idea to update those AKS templates so it's easier to, at least for new users, they can just keep applying, generating and applying as many clusters as they want.
That makes sense to me. So so this, it's open, so this is not fixed. So I imagine if I go in and I go to the AK, this is I assume this is the AKS template that is direct, is sourced from cluster CTL. Cool. So the point is that cluster CTL does not have a hook into this customize variable,
or into the machine pool. So I believe the machine pool and then the Azure managed machine pool, I believe. Yeah, so the metadata.name on x65 is just pool 0.
Ah, okay. I would,
pool 1,
okay,
yeah.
Cool, that makes sense. Or the namespace could also somehow, maybe the easiest way would be to put the cluster name as the value of the namespace, and that would, no, Cecile, I'm looking at your response. Sorry.
Namespace is fine because you can apply several objects in the same. But all the flavor templates use the default namespace. So to keep things simple, I think we should keep the same thing across all flavors. But the pool name shouldn't be hard coded. I think it's a bug that the pool name is hard coded. Even if you're using Tilt or something like that, and you want to apply the same template several times, we should just make it like I think I can already suggested that in your issue. We should just make the cluster name part of the pool name. That way it's per cluster.
Yeah, at least my understanding is that that should work. I think if, on the issue, if you scroll down to the comment, if we add the cluster name to the pool name, and then there's a spec.name field, I can't remember, on the Azure machine pool.
Yeah.
Then that will, if I remember correctly, the original issue was we have to keep the name short, so the hard-coded short name can be on the spec, and then the CRD name can have longer names.
That, yeah, it would need some testing to discover super annoying stuff like that, but this seems like a perfectly rational step forward. Mike?
Yeah, I'm very much a +1 for making the shift as it's described right here, where the CR name has the cluster name in it and the spec.name has the short name. This really threw me off when I was first starting, and it caused a lot of confusion with the names. So having this will really clarify, I think, for a lot of people.
Cool. Yeah. No, so thank you so much, Akinlulu, for taking this on. Do you feel like you have enough information to make the next step? Do you need help actually making a PR to apply this change?
Yes, I'll reach out in Slack and try to get help with how to get started in testing and all that. But yeah, I can definitely take a look at this.
Okay, great. Cool. I see another link here. I'll just open it up while we're on this topic. So is this is related to, is this oh, this is different. Can you feel free to explain what the relevance of this PR is?
It might have been a typo, or might have copied the wrong link.
Oh, I see. Okay. Cool.
Yeah, I'll take that out of the agenda, or unless
Okay.
someone else added it, I'm not sure.
Cool. All right, great. Yeah, no, we'd be happy to help you get this through. It sounds like it will help a lot of folks, especially folks using this for the first time, those are very important folks to help. All right, we're a little early, which I mean, not too early, but can give folks 5 minutes of their time back. Final agenda item has to do with canceling next week for Thanksgiving. That seems, as US biased as it actually is, seems sensible to do that. We'll lose a lot of folks. Is that okay if other folks who are not in the US and are eating not turkey want to self-organize? Feel free to do so. We'll go ahead and formally cancel that for next week. All right. Great to see so many folks here. See folks in 2 weeks. See you on Slack.
Thanks, Jack.
Yep.
Thanks, Jack, and happy Thanksgiving to folks who are celebrating.
Thank you kindly. Likewise.